Hudson River Estuary Program, part of New York State DEC and Water Resources Institute at Cornell University. I'm going to be kicking the event off, but I just want to introduce our team here that's presenting. We have Emily Vale from the Hudson River Watershed Alliance, Jess Coonan from New York Sea Grant, Hannah Maiko from the River Network, and you'll also be hearing from Nate Mitchell from the Village of Piermont. Okay, share my screen. All right, well, we'll get started. We're so happy everyone is joining us today to kick off our new 5-year strategic roadmap for the Flood Resilience Network. I'm just going to provide a brief kind of history and context and then hand it over for other folks to get more into the details of what we're talking about today. So in case anyone's wondering, this was one of our previous network events a few years ago at the Clearwater Barn in Kingston, where we were drawing how community members feel about their work in flood resilience. So I really like this one on the left because she was talking about like multitasking and trying to juggle a lot of things at once. So just very briefly, I represent the estuary program, as I mentioned. We serve the entire estuary watershed of the tidal Hudson River from New York City to Troy. It's about 260 local governments and 10 counties. And this partnership with the Flood Resilience Network is under our Climate Adaptive Communities benefit. And if you want to learn more, you can check out our action agenda. And we also offer various grants, including planning grants, river access, and river education. So I won't be able to go into all the climate projections and weather issues that we face, but I just want to recognize that, you know, our climate in New York State in terms of temperatures, precipitation, and sea level is higher than the average nationally and globally. That doesn't mean that we have the absolute worst climate change, but it means that we are somewhat disadvantaged when it comes to those projections. And those have different impacts on our communities, like flooding, which is why, you know, this network really came together over 5 years ago. And our program's vision, we have a larger climate resilience team and vision that has multiple programs, including the Flood Resilience Network. And our vision is that all communities are thriving, beautiful models for adapting to climate change, especially using natural and equitable solutions. And what we love about, you know, working on adaptation and working with the Flood Resilience Network is that adaptation is something that's extremely relevant on a local scale. And it's really great to see, you know, communities working on this, neighborhoods working on this, businesses, individuals. So we're here to, you know, continue to support their journey. And we know that that journey is going to be different for each community and each person. So getting to the Flood Resilience Network, we have been around, I think, over 5 years, and it's really about bringing communities together so they don't have to do this on their own. We're here to help provide support and just provide, you know, a venue for you all to work on this, to work together, to get to know each other, and to bring in expertise, authority, you know, things like state agencies, top tier researchers, and also connect in New York State programs that we might be you know, have a good contacts with, things like funding and policy. So that's where it all began. We've evolved over time. Our initial work that led to the network started in 2012 as a response to Hurricane Irene and then Hurricane Sandy. We funded 4 waterfront vulnerability assessments and adaptation plans. Shortly after that, with City of Kingston, Village of Catskill, Village of Piermont, and Town of Stony Point. And when we saw their final, you know, each community had a final adaptation plan with around 20 strategies on how to deal with flooding. And we saw so many similarities across those plans that we had this insight, you know, why are we doing this in each community individually? Can we scale this up and kind of work more together? So the partners, for those of you that have been, you know, here from the beginning or earlier on, you've probably noticed that the partners and the planning team has evolved over time. You know, earlier on, we were working with Department of State, Scenic Hudson, Consensus Building Institute, which we still work closely with. And in the last few years, New York Sea Grant and Hudson River Watershed Alliance has stepped up more to provide local leadership on this project. So in the past, the network has been funded through our local stewardship planning grants, but we recognize that there's some downside to that because there can be gaps in the grant cycle. So we have some information and news about that as well. I just want to also just take the time to, thank Heather Gearloff is our new official Hudson River Program supervisor, and that Hudson River Estuary Program is one of her programs. And then also thank Brian Rahm, the director at Water Resources Institute, because both of those have been supporting this network. So local governments have been the center of the Flood Resilience Network, and they will continue to be the center of the Flood Resilience Network. We have always been responsive to what the communities want to work on, want to talk about. And communities have always been on our planning team. So topics we've addressed in the past include, adapting infrastructure like wastewater treatment plants, citing green infrastructure, working on emergency preparedness, community engagement, flood insurance, different funding programs. And we've done that through more intensive community on the ground workshops and site visits, where communities have hosted the Flood Resilience Network and shown them around their waterfronts. And then we've also done lunch and learns like today on webinars. And we've been able to include, link the program to New York State support programs like Climate Smart Communities, and perhaps moving forward, we can interface with the Climate Leadership Act. So we're really just in awe of the members of the Flood Resilience Network. You've accomplished so much already. We've seen that the communities that are thinking about this and planning it tend to be able to leverage more grants and get public funding and get projects done. So this is just a sample of what some of the network members have done since 2015. We know that they've, have received a lot of resilience grants. I think this number is actually very underestimated, but they've also upgraded infrastructure, parks, shorelines. They've incorporated their work into different plans and processes and RFPs. And we even inspired a new coastal resilience network in Long Island that's modeled after this network, which I'm really proud of. So wrapping up here, I have a couple more slides. Today, we're here to really relaunch and expand the Flood Resilience Network. We have a goal in our action agenda to grow the membership and expand the impact to the whole watershed, which means that all flood risk local governments and the watershed are eligible, not just ones on the main stem Hudson. And today we're launching a new 5-year strategic roadmap to start showing how we're going to have more of a structure and more stability so that we can be here for our members moving forward, and members know, what to expect from the network. We also, part of that is a new advisory committee, shifting leadership. And then I want to just announce that we've been able to get new annual funding through the New York State Water Resources Institute at Cornell and our partnership with the Estuary Program. So that is funded by the New York State EPF. But that will, hopefully allow us to have some more stability over time. And then I just want to recognize how Hudson River Watershed Alliance and New York Sea Grant, Emily, Jen and Jess have really stepped up to be our boots on the ground to make sure that the network is going to have better structure and support for our communities. So I'm thrilled about that. And you'll hear more from them after I finish these slides. So we expect to continue to deliver the programming that you need, that communities need, and to be flexible over time. And, speaking of flexibility, there's some changes that have happened in the past. There's some changes that might be happening starting today. But I just want to recognize all the wonderful people that have been involved in the network over the years. I can't name everyone by name, but the original communities, Kingston, Catskill, Piermont and Stony Point, the partners, Consensus Building Institute, Bennett Brooks, Scenic Hudson, and many are still going to be involved in different capacities. Liz LaJudas, Kristen Marcel, my predecessor at the estuary program. It's just been really great having this network of people, and I'm excited to see it grow. Although I won't, I also want to announce that today, this week is actually my last week at the estuary program after over a decade. So I will miss the network and miss everyone, but I'm going to be rooting for you and tracking your progress. And I'm just so happy that this new strategic plan and the new leadership is really going to allow for more stability, because people do come and go at the community level. We know that's a challenge, and at every level, at the planning level as well. So I'm really excited and confident for the future of the network. And with that, here's our contact info for the estuary program. And with that, I want to hand it over to one of our partners, Nate Mitchell. He is a village trustee in Piermont and also one of the members of the Piermont Waterfront Resilience Commission. So Nate, you can take it away.
Morning, everybody, or I guess it's afternoon now. It's great to be here with you and talking about this 5-year strategic plan. And Piermont's a community that's been involved with the FRN from the inception, but for the first few years, we really weren't sure what exactly it was going to be and if we were going to be able to keep it going on a year-to-year basis. And so it's really gratifying to see that there is support there, and there is a need that other communities have seen where this could be a benefit to them. And for a place like Piermont, which I'm sure there's a number of other communities that can, be interested in tapping into this resource, we're tiny and we just don't really have the staff to go out and do the research to find the resources that are going to be instrumental in us finding our best outcomes. So seeing this taking on a life of its own is something that I'm really happy to see, and I'm glad to be a part of it and hope to continue working in the future.
Thanks, Nate.
And is there somebody, who do I hand it off to?
That is a good question. Yeah, Emily.
Yeah, so Jess will be sharing her screen, and I think we'll hand it to Hannah first.
Great, thanks everybody. So as Libby introduced me in the beginning of the webinar, my name is Hannah Maiko. I am a staff member at River Network, which is a nationwide capacity building network. And one of the many roles that I am privileged to play is to help organizations, networks, and coalitions around the country with their strategic road mapping and planning processes. So I was invited back in early 2022 to start this process, and just kind of wanted to give an overview of the role that I've been honored to play and review some of our stakeholder engagement along this process. We never want to make a strategic plan that doesn't have buy-in from the folks who will be involved in it. So we were really intentional about, over the course of about 6 months, really digging in and getting the feedback from folks who are already involved in this network, as well as folks who are prospective members of this network, to figure out why they aren't participating yet and what that next step is that they would need to take to participate. So back in August, some of you might recognize me from either in-person or virtual stakeholder engagement sessions. But back in August, we did a hybrid session to really just get a feel for how the network wanted to gather. So talking about things like group agreements and values, talking a little bit about how a network should be structured, talking about feedback systems to understand how people wanted to continue to be present in this process. And then in October, I was really lucky to get to come visit you all in Kingston, and we did an in-person half-day session. Some of you might have been there. We were all gathered around at tables doing really good brainstorming, having some really juicy discussions about relationship building, what it means to be a member, what it means to partner with this network, talking about things that we felt like we were experts in and things we wanted to learn more about. So that was really, really wonderful. And from there, we took it into doing some focus groups with municipal members, as well as some of the network's founders, to really gain an understanding of the historical context and how much of that will carry into the future of this network. And then kind of wrapped up that process in February with a network-wide survey, as well as some peer sharing with other flood resilience networks in the country, including one in Massachusetts, and then one that is nationwide. And then throughout that entire process, we were meeting with our strategic planning team, the networks planning team and steering committee. We were conducting some one-on-one conversations and interviews with key stakeholders who weren't available for some of those other opportunities, just to make sure that we had a really holistic picture of everyone's ideas about this network and making sure that we had that buy-in. One of my favorite things to say about strategic planning is that the point isn't to make a really beautiful strategic plan to put on your shelf. By the end of your strategic plan, it should like be a little muddy and have some coffee spilled on it and have crinkled pages and maybe some rips in it, because you keep taking it back off that shelf and referencing it because it's a guiding iterative document. So having this much stakeholder engagement was a really key component in making sure that this roadmap actually reflects the needs of the folks involved. And as I'm talking, if you all have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat as well. And move on to the next slide. Thanks. So why did we embark on this process in the first place? I feel like Libby lined this up really well for us, that there have been changes throughout the last couple of years. We'll continue to see changes in the future. And this roadmap document is meant to be a really high-level guiding document for the network. It's outlining some of our basic structures. It's outlining how leadership is functioning, some general programming goals year to year that we want to accomplish, as well as kind of outlining shared responsibility, right? A network is unique in that it has to have participation from everyone involved, or else networking doesn't really work, right? So making sure that we understand what our shared responsibility is, whether we're in a leadership position, whether we're a member, whether we're a partner to the network, or playing some other role. Roadmaps or strategic plans are intentionally iterative and flexible. They're not meant to be set in stone and this is what's going to happen over the next 5 years. If we have learned anything over the last 5 years, it's that we need to be really adaptive, right? And sometimes the things we plan for do not come to fruition, but being able to change gears and still keep true to what we know we need to be doing is really important. So that strategic plan that we've created is really intentionally flexible. It has a lot of guiding information in it, but it is not prescriptive over the next 5 years. It's an outline. And I just want to say as well that these documents are most impactful when we have feedback systems and assessments in place to make sure that we are making progress on the goals that we set and making sure that we are being iterative and flexible along the way. So parts of this roadmap do identify creating feedback systems for the network, creating self-assessments for the leadership team, making sure that we're checking in on a regular basis so that this plan does not sit pretty on a shelf, but it does have those mud marks and coffee spills on it in a couple of years. Emily, I think you're going to jump in here.
Yeah, so I get to talk about leadership, which I'm really excited to do. This image here is from the stakeholder engagement session that Hannah led back in October in Kingston, and we had some pieces of paper on the walls, and we asked people to draw what shared leadership looked like to them, and we got all of these wonderful concepts. And as Libby mentioned, as Hannah mentioned, leadership has been shifting over time for FRN depending on who has received this 2-year estuary program grant. And we saw a real need for consistent leadership. And not only that, but really understanding roles, who's doing what, who can we count on for these types of responsibilities and roles. The Flood Resilience Network has always been driven by municipalities, but we know that municipalities have limited capacity, and we want to know how support staff, how partners can really provide the kinds of support that's most useful to implementing flood resilience measures. So acknowledging that capacity can be limited for municipalities and partners alike, we want to make sure that the gears of FRN turn really efficiently to make the most of everyone's time. So we knew that shared leadership was really going to be key in this process, and using the roadmap to identify, whose roles are what in this shared leadership structure was really significant. And before I keep going, I just want to give a shout out and thank you to everyone who served on both the strategic planning and the planning team. There's been some overlap in Venn diagrams here. So just really want to shout out Nate Mitchell and Julie Noble from Village of Piermont and City of Kingston, respectively, founding municipal members of the Flood Resilience Network. So valuable to get their feedback through this process. Betsy Blair, Bennett Brooks from Consensus Building Institute, Jen Benson at the Hudson River Watershed Alliance. You already heard from Libby. You'll be hearing from Jessica Coonan from New York Sea Grant, but it really took a team to be meeting very consistently over the past 6 months and hammering out these details, reflecting on the feedback, reflecting on flood events that we saw, listening to municipalities and seeing that some of their conditions on the ground. So this has really been a team effort. So before we talk about the next steps for leadership, I want to acknowledge a lot of the leadership that's already been taking place in this space. So the network will really be led by an advisory committee. So the advisory committee will include 4 municipalities. And when we use the term municipalities or local governments, we're inclusive of towns, cities, villages, and counties. And along with 3 partner organizations, including a seat for the Hudson River Estuary Program. So the advisory committee will have some core roles around advising, that's in their name, advising on programming, helping us prioritize topics covered in training and informational sessions. They'll direct FRN goals and strategies. So thinking back to what Hannah said about how the roadmap is iterative and we'll be assessing our progress over time, the advisory committee will be helping us keep on track and adjust when needed. They'll help identify needs and gaps for resource creation and sharing, and really significantly keep the network scope grounded in local priorities. We really want to make sure that again, local governments are centered in this process. The advisory committee may also be making decisions on behalf of the network as opportunities come up, things like funding, advocacy. They may play roles in planning or facilitating meetings, and so on. Next slide. So to support the advisory committee, we've identified the need for an operations committee. And the operations committee will include New York Sea Grant and Hudson River Watershed Alliance. We'll also be including Consensus Building Institute and Bennett on this team during this year of transition. And the roles of the operations committee are to co-facilitate the Flood Resilience Network, to coordinate and implement programming, provide administrative support for all of the structures, and then also do some fundraising to make sure we can identify additional funding sources. So as Libby mentioned, we will be supported through an annual contract with the New York State Water Resource Institute at Cornell University. And this allows us to keep the lights on, right? And make sure that we're operationalizing the Flood Resilience Network, that we're implementing the priorities identified by the advisory committee, and having some paid staff that can do that labor. So it's not falling all on the municipal volunteers. I'm also really excited about our new working group structure. So working groups can include both municipal members and partners. We'll talk about the definitions of those terms in a moment. The working groups are designed to be temporary, project-based groups that will carry out the strategies and advance goals of the Flood Resilience Network. So this is an opportunity for additional leadership and more focused participation. So we will have working group chairs, we will have working group members that are focused on specific projects that have an outcome at the end of that, as opposed to a more standing committee. So through our roadmap process and our conversations with FRN members and partners, we identified some working groups that we think will be really high priority. So the first one will be governance, and the governance will take all of what we've been talking about in the roadmap and really make sure the rubber hits the road. You know, how exactly do we do this goal? How exactly do we track FRN members? We will be sorting all of this out with the governance working group, which I'm very excited about, and it's pretty nerdy, but I'm very excited about it. We've also identified needs for a website working group, so FRN can build out a website presence, what information is most important on there. Funding hub came up as a priority, needs around storytelling and communications, specific event planning, and geography and types of flooding. So there might be a working group focused on particular coastal flooding or inland flooding needs, and so on.
I'll jump back in here, Emily. Thanks so much for that overview on leadership and structures. I just want to reiterate how excited I am about the working group structure as well. Also that Emily is so excited about governance, because I hardly meet people who are. But yeah, those working groups really came out of the feedback from those really big stakeholder sessions, as well as some of our peer sharing and learning from other networks as well, and how they're structuring the work that they do. So very informed working groups there that we chose. And also there's lots of space for other working groups to emerge along the way if they're needed. But as Emily said, we wanted to give you a little bit of a definition around what we mean when we're talking about members and partners, because this is one of the key transitional pieces that's a part of this roadmap. One thing that came up kind of consistently throughout stakeholder engagement was that the network needs to be centered on municipalities. Municipal members are what drives this work. They're at the center of flood resilience work. So how do we elevate them and their experiences in this network? So members from now on refer specifically to municipalities and counties, like Emily said, in the Lower Hudson River watershed. I loved the language that Libby used at the beginning of this presentation. Any municipality that's experiencing flood risk in that watershed is now eligible to be a member, which, Emily, can you remind me how many municipalities that might include or invite into this process?
Approximately 250, although I think we're going to ask the governance working group to make sure we're counting them all correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really big and exciting, and it can also be overwhelming. So part of the roadmap process is pacing that growth so that we don't explode all at once, because that would be a lot of municipalities to be working with. But also we really wanted to be mindful about not excluding municipalities who are experiencing different kinds of flooding throughout the watershed. On the flip side of that are partners. Partners are categorized by these, the language that you see below that. So agency partners, community partners, and consulting partners. And you might be reading some of those examples and saying, yes, I squarely fit into some of those categories. I understand that I'm a partner and not a member. And the main difference between that is that in centering municipalities in this network and making sure that there's support for them, there might be some member-specific programming that's really focused on municipalities going forward. There might be opportunities where those municipalities are invited to give specific kinds of feedback, or we've talked about the concept of adding in voting later on if there ever becomes a need for that. So the municipalities really being centered in decision-making and giving feedback, and partners supporting the work of operationalizing that and really stepping in to support those municipalities. But there obviously being benefits for both parties, as well as things that we hope you are excited to contribute. So on the next slide here, it just kind of outlines that members and partners are going to be tracked or kind of identified through an annual agreement or inventory process. We're trying to keep this as light and as burden-free as possible. It's really just a way for us to understand who's committing to this work year to year, to understand the goals of different members and partners, to have updated contact information so we know who to reach out to when we're doing member and partner activities. So there will be kind of an annual re-up just to make sure that the network is current. And as I said, there's an expectation to participate in programming, with some of that programming being member specific just for municipalities. We heard some feedback that municipal representatives do need spaces where they can feel safe and vulnerable to talk about how difficult some of this work is, to share not only their successes, but also hard lessons learned from trying and not succeeding. And that those spaces are really important. So prioritizing that for members. Both parties are expected to contribute and also receive benefits from the network. So partners will have access to all of these municipal members that they can work with, perhaps put bids in on infrastructure projects, do consulting with. So really opening up that opportunity to access them, and the municipalities hopefully having a dependable list of partners when they want to embark on these flood resilience projects. And both parties can serve on that advisory committee that Emily talked about, can serve in working groups if they're excited about specific topics or have really good expertise to contribute.
So I've said it again, but we'll say we'll say this a couple times, right? That for members, we're really centering local governments, towns, cities, villages, and counties. The municipality will be the member, and the membership will be represented by elected, appointed, or hired officials that are working on flooding issues. So that may be a CAC member, that might be a staff person, that might be the mayor or supervisor of the village, city, or town. And so we wanted to just break that out. Again, thinking about resiliency many times over, it's best if we have multiple representatives from each municipal member, and trying to build some of the capacity there as well. And one thing I wanted to highlight for partners is that I think this structure really provides an opportunity for people from different sectors all across the region to plug in, share their expertise, and share their resources. In previous iterations of FRN, we included partners, but it wasn't always clear where exactly they fit in. It's clear that so many regional organizations, agencies, businesses have such expertise on these issues, and we wanted to make sure we were really mindful about how we bring that in and leverage all of your expertise to the shared benefit of local flood resilience work. So I pulled this out. We have in the strategic roadmap a list of FRN values, and one of them is to value and elevate all of the knowledge in the network. So we've identified these structures that I think helps give form to our values to get work done in a way that's really thoughtful. As Hannah mentioned, we are expanding the FRN geographic scope to include local governments throughout the Hudson Valley. This is a map of many of the municipalities that would be eligible. And like I mentioned, we'll probably bring this to the governance working group to identify, what exactly, do you have to be completely within? Is it okay to have a portion? But what we wanted to expand the network, it's in the Hudson River Estuary Program's action agenda to do so. And as we were getting feedback from stakeholders, we heard all of the benefits of additional participation, expertise, networking. Many times the communities along the Hudson River are dealing with multiple types of flooding, both coastal, inland, urban flooding, stormwater systems that are undersized, right? There's people across the region that are dealing with this, and bringing more people in, again, in a very structured and thoughtful way, can really leverage a lot of the power of these local governments and really help connect people to more resources. So I wanted to mention that we'll continue to address Hudson River and coastal flooding specifically through FRN programming. We're certainly not leaving behind the sea level rise work or the task forces or some of the coastal flooding that we know it can be so significant, but we're adding an additional layer here as well.
Okay, thanks Hannah and Emily for that overview. I know you're all on the edge of your seats wanting to look at this plan, but we do have a few minor changes that we're just working out. So you can expect to see that on Monday. I'm going to be emailing everyone here and the network with the strategic roadmap. So please take a look and get familiar with that, especially the tasks in year one, the working group structure, and the membership and partnership levels. In that email, we're also going to have a link to a Google form, and this is going to be your opportunity to either join or rejoin FRN by filling out the appropriate member or partner agreement form. This is also where you can say that you're interested in joining the advisory committee now or in the future, as well as the working groups that we mentioned. And in addition to that, you can always email me. I'll throw my email in the chat if you have questions or just want to make a plug for a future working group. Then on our end, the current FRN planning team and steering committee, we're going to be working through this transition this summer. Starting the governance work group and just implementing some of those year one tasks. And so besides that, just keep an eye out for updates from us via email as you have been. And we'll still continue to have some virtual programming this summer and planning on a fall site visit as well.
So lastly, we just wanted to, again, invite you to join working groups and think about where your interest and expertise best fits into this new FRN structure. Again, the working groups are time-bound and project-focused that can include both members and partners. In the roadmap, we've identified some priorities around governance as the first working group to really hit the ground running here, but also website and funding. And you can see, as Hannah mentioned, this phased approach to building up and ramping up FRN. Some other concepts that we've been hearing some needs about are around communicating with residents and businesses during flooding, and maybe building out some toolkits, local policy review, code review, and thinking about resilience measures that are possible there. We're hoping, again, in a very iterative process, to really build out the website that has these resource hubs so that a working group might develop a product like the funding hub that then goes onto the website and is accessible for FRN members. So we're really trying to think about how we can promote these focused areas of work and networking around these topics that benefit the network at large as well.
All right. So with that, we're going to turn it over to you and just see how this has landed with you all, and give you the opportunity to ask any questions. So yeah. Does anyone have questions about where they may fall as either a member or a partner? Oh, Larissa, go ahead.
Hi, thank you all. I'll just say that once, but thank you all for this amazing work. I'm so excited about this. I was just wondering if any of you, it doesn't matter who answers, can talk a little bit more about how you're going to engage municipality staff. Are there ways to have the usual suspects who've already been involved be ambassadors to additional communities among the 250 plus that you mentioned? Just wondering about how to corral the municipality staff, especially because we all know there's times when there's great ideas out there, and if you don't have the right people at the table that can actually help make the decisions or talk to their city councils, et cetera, or county boards, just want to talk a little bit more about that for a few minutes. I think this will have the most teeth if it's got more municipal buy-in. I'm sorry, I'm like eating my lunch and my brain is a little tired today, as Emily knows. So yeah, just thinking about how to be sure that we get the municipal and the county buy-in that you really want in order to have success, because they're really the ones, as you said, that are making decisions and spending money on the projects, et cetera.
Yeah, I'll start and then I'll hand it off to my colleagues here. So I think our first order of business is working with everyone who's already engaged in the Flood Resilience Network. That includes a wide range of people working for, with, on behalf of municipalities, and starting to get make sure our systems are all working and get everyone who's already been participating. I think Libby had on her list over 20 municipalities to date. So we really want to make sure that that's the foundation that we start with in year one. And then building on that, I think we had planned, and Hannah, maybe in year 2 or 3, a much more concerted outreach effort. To date, FRN membership has really grown by word of mouth. We'll be in a community, we'll do a workshop with them and say, I think you'd be a great fit for this. And so it's been building very organically, which has been helpful given the capacity and scale of it to date. And I think once we have these pieces in place, we'll really be able to ramp up. And I think, Larissa, your idea of having ambassadors and sort of peer networks and thinking through, the roles that both members and partners might be able to play in getting the word out, we'll be able to think about that. Thank you.
And I'll piggyback a little bit on that just to detail something you can look for if you do review the roadmap and specifically the 5-year work plan. So years 1 and 2 are really focused on this transitional time. And like Emily said, making sure that the foundation of the network, those who have been engaged, are coming along with us. Year 2 includes scoping of a cohort style municipal onboarding program. And this was something that came really clearly out of the founders focus group, which a couple of you are on this call and brought this up. And I thought it was just an absolute gemstone to include moving forward. That the first iteration of the Flood Resilience Network was really successful because the first communities who came on did it together. There were these 3 or 4 communities that came on, did these assessments, we're very much in a cohort together, and that's what made it so successful, and that we need to continue to rely on that kind of a model going forward. So it really, in year 2, we have a bit of a scoping process to figure out how we want to approach a cohort style and make sure that it still works, with year 3 being that intentional outreach and maybe onboarding a pilot cohort to try that again and make sure that that's the approach that works well moving forward, but without it being exclusive. Of course, we don't want to say because you can't participate in this cohort right now, you're not welcome, but perhaps that being that onboarding moment to make sure that municipalities are coming in with really, really strong roots to stay and sustain the work that they start.
Thank you. I think that sounds like you're setting up a nice amount of time to make sure that these municipalities and counties get the message that you're going to be asking for staff time, and there's money involved in that and other resources, of course, too. So thank you. Sorry about my ditzy question. My brain was not totally cross-wiring the right way this morning.
It was a great question. Thank you for asking it.
Thank you all.
Yeah, I would just add to that, building on what Hannah was talking about with the onboarding process. I think the creation of this membership agreement is going to be very helpful in that process in kind of a bi-directional way. So one of the things that we had initially that we talked about was what is a member of the FRN. And since its inception, it's essentially meant, well, I don't know who showed up at the last meeting. So getting municipalities to actually commit to say, we are going to participate in this process, and it may involve some staff participation, there may be some expense involved or whatever, is important, and also works both ways because the municipalities then know what to expect of each other and understand that this is something there's a commitment to, and everyone else is sharing the same commitment. So that creates that kind of a cohort environment also, in that we're all in the same boat. So I think that was a big step forward, getting that piece put together.
Go ahead, Jack.
Thanks a lot. And thanks for letting myself and my colleague David Kay join. I'm Jack Zinda. I'm here with the Flood Risk Research and Engagement team at Cornell. And we've really appreciated chances to connect with many of the people in this room at various times with the course of research. Currently, we're doing a lot of work on understandings of and also affordability around flood insurance. And anyway, I was just wondering if the partner category also includes people who are in the research world, or if there are other ways that are better for us to connect with the network.
That's a great question. I know we didn't explicitly call out academia or research partners in our kind of list at the moment, but I don't know if we can certainly talk about that and figure that out early on too, especially as the governance work group starts meeting. Yeah, I think there's definitely a role. We don't want to lose you guys, so we'll figure out how to fit you into the partnerships.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Ray, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to pose this, and appreciate all the effort that's gone into this. So as a resident and a person working with Nate on the PWRC, and having lived in several other communities up and down the Hudson Valley, there are often times where there's distinct conflict among some of these very small village boards with very small boards. And so there may be a situation where a mayor is dead against the participation and won't sign the kind of bilateral agreement you're talking about, but there may be one or two other council people or village board members that may. I don't know if you talked about it. It probably needs to be worked out in the governance section, but I think, you know, my experience has been in 3 different locations I've lived in, tremendous challenges on agreement and consensus. So we wouldn't want to not allow someone who is interested and maybe through the course of a few years is then in a better position politically to support the efforts. I'm sure you've been talking about this, but yeah, just to support the good work for everyone who wants to do the good work. And I'll leave it there.
Thanks so much for that comment. I do want to acknowledge that it was something that was elevated really strongly by Julie Noble during some of our planning conversations. And one of the questions I believe that made it into that membership form is, I can't remember how we phrased it, but kind of the level of buy-in you have from your municipal government. So everything from I've talked to someone else in my municipal government about joining this group to I have full buy-in from my whole administration. And that's a question that we propose to be in that membership form so that we can assess as a team, as especially the operations committee and the advisory group, of what kinds of additional support or messaging we might help with to get more buy-in from those municipalities. And it was something that we distinctively agreed on too, that we're not signing like a resolution, because that would be a really big barrier to some of these municipalities joining. So that membership agreement is, I would view it more so as an interest form, letting us know these are my goals for my municipality. This is the kind of buy-in or discussion I've had with folks. This is what I'm most interested in. I'd love to host a site visit this year. These are the contacts that are interested in this at our municipality. So that was something that we've talked about, and I think the governance committee is going to really sink its teeth into this next year, because it's absolutely true, especially with the frequency of turnover in local elections. Just want to acknowledge that.
I see a hand up from Anila.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Some of you on the call I do know, and thanks to Cornell for doing it. I do have that's my old alma mater, so I kind of feel fondly about that as well. Question related to the academic and research piece, as well as the nexus between that and equity and resilience. I'm really looking forward to collaborating and hearing more about shared community-led templates and best practices that are focused on equity and resilience. Because, you know, that climate vulnerability piece is key. I currently work with NYSERDA. And so looking forward to hearing all the great stuff that you're going to be doing and collaborating on that piece.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think equity will certainly be an important topic that will show up in our programming. And perhaps even an opportunity for a future work group.
And also, potential alignment with the Climate Leadership Act and the equity and the disadvantaged community work that's going on there, and the preferred funding. And there's a lot of new stuff happening in New York State that would be good for the network to be engaged.
Yes. Yeah. So just keep in mind that that's both a sort of a way to organize around fundraising, research, community engagement. It has multiple levels there for disadvantaged communities and climate resilience. Happy to do a sidebar or however you want to handle it.
Great. Any other questions or comments? All right, everyone.
I think Betsy wanted to chime in.
Oh yeah, Betsy, did you have
Hi.
anything to add?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, just a quick comment following up, I think, on Jack's comment, and you as well, Anila, that an interesting thing for us to be working on figuring out is whether there's what a research agenda might look like around different questions, and creating a more interactive, collaborative way of identifying and figuring out appropriate responses, and possibly even collaborating on how to generate answers to those questions, what the funding might look like.
Great, love it. Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands or comments in the chat. Unless anyone else has something to say, I think this is, thank you all for coming. You can expect, oh.
I have something to say. I'm sorry, Jess. I just was wondering if we could just give Libby Zamaitis a quick round of applause, because this is her last week at the SRA program. And Libby has been so foundational to so much of the work. Yes, like just, yeah, maybe we could even go off mute for a second and just applaud her. Libby, we're going to miss you so much in the Hudson Valley in this space. We know you're not going that far. And yeah, just want to take a moment of that celebration, because we will miss you, but we're excited to move this forward and with your past leadership.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Emily and everyone. Yeah, this is crazy. I've given so
Thank
many
you, Libby.
talks over the years. So it's crazy. It's the last one. But yeah, it's been such a privilege, such an honor working with all of you. And I know there's such strong networks and partners and leaders, and I'm still going to be in the adaptation and resilience space. So I expect we'll cross paths, and I'll be looking to the FRN for case studies in the future. So thank you.
And I would just love to chime in as a last thought and thank all of the folks who worked on the strategic road mapping process, and just how warm and welcoming folks were. I'm based out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, so sometimes there can be a weird reception, like, why is this non-local person doing this with us? But folks were very warm and informative, and I just want to have a huge thank you to folks for raising really good questions, for being really honest and vulnerable during this process, talking about their own challenges and barriers to participating in this network, but also working on a national scale, how wonderful it is to see a regional network like this building and growing and gaining momentum, because it's very much needed. Flood resilience work, as we all know, does not happen in silos and does not happen individually. It happens on large scales. So just thank you all for your participation, your feedback, your comments over the last 6 months. Some of you have heard from me like obnoxiously frequently. And I just really want to share my appreciation for you all buying into this process and participating along the way.
All right, thanks, Hannah. Thanks, everyone. I think it's safe to wrap it up there, and look for that email on Monday where you can check out the strategic plan and fill out your membership or partnership form. All right, have a great rest of the day and great weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.